Hi, listeners. Just a note that this episode contains discussion of a film depicting drug use and infant death. So please take care of yourself if you've been affected by these issues. In my mind, Ewan was always the first choice. We did some casting, and that's how we met Johnny. Gail Stevens, the casting director, met a lot of Scottish actors. Johnny was the only one who wasn't Scottish. Ewan Bremner was in the play. We all knew Ewan. Then came Robert Carlyle. I guess the thing with them was, would they play the part more than were they the first choice? We were always worried they wouldn't accept it. Bremner was playing written in the play. Would he do this? Thank God he did. So when the Shallow Grave video came out, we made a little trailer from the set that we put at the front, which was Ewan McGregor tied to the train tracks. We had this beautiful thing where we had a group of people who had just made a film together, making another film together with the same financier, same scriptwriter, and same leading actor. And that was producer Andrew MacDonald in 2017 in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter about the 1996 film Trainspotting. Hello and welcome to Total 90s Recall. I'm Molly.
And I'm Chloe.
And this is the podcast where we're rewatching 90s films to ask ourselves, were these really as good or bad as we remember, or as their reputation implies? And today we are very excited to have an amazing guest to talk about Trainspotting, Yasmin Godo. Yasmin, how are you?
I'm well, my love. How are we?
We're good. We're excited to have you. That is because Yasmin is a South London award-winning director and writer. She is part of the 2025 BAFTA BFI Flair cohort, and she also has 10 years of experience across film and television industry. She's successfully commissioned for the 40th anniversary broadcast across Channel 4's Random Acts. She's the director of Royal Dengart Theatre production Mental. She shadowed on BBC's EastEnders, Emmerdale, and Apple TV's returning series Criminal Record. And she's currently director's assistant and second unit director on Dame Jilly Cooper's Rivals, which you can see the second season on Disney Plus or ITV. So thanks so much for coming, Yasmin. We're so excited to have you.
What an intro. Duh, thank you for having me.
Well, so Yasmin, you wanted to do this film. When was the first time you saw Trainspotting?
God, that's a question, isn't it? I feel like at a time, I don't think I was too young to watch it, but probably too young to appreciate the nuance of it. So probably in my teens, so maybe 2005, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe sooner than that, because I was born in 89, so I would have had no business watching it when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to say probably my early mid-teens is when I watched it. It would have been a late Channel 4 broadcast, sneaky.
And do you remember at that time, do you remember how you felt the first time you watched it?
I was blown away.
Yeah?
I was really, really blown away by how just raw it was, you know. But also I think I was really subjected because my mum didn't have Sky. My dad did, but we had just our 5 terrestrial channels. Our
Yeah.
reception on Channel 5 barely worked. So was subjected to watching the 4 terrestrial channels for ages. And you know, we used to get a lot of those like Britpop programs, 1050 best UK film.
Yes. Yes. That was all the television for a while. Just
Honestly,
lists.
that was all TV was, just glorified lists. Trainspotting was always on the list.
Yeah.
Chloe, what about you? What was the first time you saw this film? Do you remember?
Last night. I'm so embarrassed. I don't know. I'm not allowed to watch any films from now on. I can't call myself a film fan and admit that I've only just seen this film. But I will say that I felt like I had seen it before because it's so famous.
Yeah.
I knew how a lot of the scenes were going to play out. As a child, I was an avid reader of all film magazines and media. And so I have absorbed by osmosis. Or you might say I've had it injected into me.
Oh, nice.
All of how these different scenes play out. And so I knew the film even though I didn't know it. And so actually watching it, I wasn't surprised because I just I feel like I've just kind of grown up with it.
Yeah.
And so it felt like quite a strange and big moment for me to finally sit down and watch it. And I just don't know why I haven't sat down and made the effort to watch it. But like you, Yasmin, obviously I wasn't quite the right age when it came out.
Yeah. I don't think any of us were. No, if it makes you feel any better, Chloe, this was the first time I had watched it 2 or 3 days ago. However, I did see a couple years ago, I think it was 2019 at Edinburgh Fringe. I saw the Trainspotting play. And so I was prepared, but I gotta say, you know how when people go through traumatic events, they forget certain things, or some of it was familiar. Like I was very familiar with it, but we'll get into it later. But the scene with the baby, was shocking for me. We'll get into it later, but I was just like, oh God. After it was all done, I was like, shit, I remember that now from the play, but I think I had just got it out of my brain.
Yeah. Actually, when I watched that, Molly, I thought
Yeah.
of you because I did think to myself, this has got to be a hard watch.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got to be a hard watch for your
Yeah.
parent. But I think that scene deserves its place, if you see what I mean. So
Yeah, and we'll get. I want to get into that. Before we get into that, we'll have a little warning, a little self-care warning.
Yeah.
I will say from like American perspective, I do remember vaguely when this. I remember when this came out, and this was like the I don't know if raunchy is the right word, but like risque British film about drugs, and I was 13 when it came out, so I definitely would not have been allowed to see it or would watch it. And I think by the time I would have watched something like this, it would have been in the late 90s. And by that time, I had seen Requiem of a Dream. And by that time, I was like, I can't handle anything more. And so then life just goes on. But I am so glad Yasmin chose this. So before we get into it, let's kind of go back into the time machine. And it was released at the 1996 Cannes Film Festival. It was shown out of competition, according to the filmmakers, due to its subject matter. Now, Chloe, you're going to love this one. It was released first in the UK,
as it should have
on
been,
the 23rd of February.
Yeah.
And then in the US on the 19th of July. Yes, and as we're going through these, a lot of films, of even British films, even like Four Weddings and a Funeral, I think, would release in the US first and then come to the UK. Anyway, fun fact. Anyway, budget 1.5 million pounds, but the film grossed 12 million pounds and then $72 million, 48 million pounds internationally. And so based on its cost to return ratio, Trainspotting was the most profitable film of 1996. So there you go.
Well, hang on.
Yeah.
Of all films.
Of 1996. It was the most profitable.
Not just British.
Wow. All films, because it was only 1.5 million pounds to make.
Wow.
And when it's making, 48 plus, so it's making 60 million pounds in total, that's a good return.
Yeah.
So that's why you should invest in independent cinema. Anyway,
I love that dog.
Yes.
Of course. Well, maybe you don't, or maybe you do know. It was directed by Danny Boyle. This is after his debut film Shallow Grave, which I think was referred to in that interview with Andrew MacDonald in 1994. It won the BAFTA for Best British Film. It also had Ewan McGregor. This is, of course, before Slumdog Millionaire, 28 Days Later, and everything else he's done since. It was written by Irvine Welsh, based on his book, and John Hodge, who's also a regular Boyle collaborator, starring, of course, Ewan McGregor. Ewan McGregor was in Boyle's first 3 movies. Ewan Bremner, Johnny Lee Miller, thank you. And he was kind of like the big boy because he had just had his big hit Hackers. Robert Carlyle, Kelly MacDonald, this is her first film, and Kevin McKidd, which American listeners will know him from Grey's Anatomy. Trainspotting was nominated for 2 BAFTAs in 1996, Best British Film and Best Adapted Screenplay, which it won for. And the log line is Renton, deeply immersed in the Edinburgh drug scene, tries to clean up and get out despite the allure of drugs and the influence of friends. Do we think that's accurate, ladies?
That feels really bubblegum for what the film is.
I was going to say the phrase deeply immersed is doing some heavy lifting there. Who writes these IMDb log lines? I want to know.
Marketing execs.
Oh, dear.
They're like, if we say this, people will accept
Just
it.
make it, let's just sort of soften what it's about, yeah.
So why are we covering this? Why did we want to watch this? Well, first of all, it's the 30th anniversary of the film, which sounds bonkers to say, as I said, because I feel weird because I'm 30. How is this also 30?
It's
I
not
don't.
possible.
I
It's
was
not possible.
literally just born.
Yeah.
It's
I know.
still fresh on the
Yeah,
womb.
exactly. Doesn't make sense.
So this is the 30th anniversary of the film, but it was a huge film for British cinema and for Scotland. And when we were talking to Yasmin about like what films do you want to cover, Chloe reached out to you and said some films, and you responded, quote, "OMG, Trainspotting is literally my favorite film." So Yasmin, why is Trainspotting your favorite film, and why did you want to do it for this podcast?
Before I answer that, I really want to put a big disclaimer out there because actually, given how dark the film is, it's like, oh, darling, do you have some trauma you want to talk to us about? So just want to point out there, I am okay psychologically. So just want to point out there,
Yeah.
why is it my favorite film? I think just everything about it is just so quintessentially British. And I think, given, I mean, I've
Yes.
already unfortunately revealed somewhat my age from the year I was born, but I think by the time I kind of started to come into my own, a lot of like the pop culture films that was really doing the rounds that solidified what I now want to go on to like make from a slightly differing lens, it pretty much is Trainspotting. Maybe sans the heavy drug
Yeah.
use and like, yeah, there's a lot of shit in the film.
Yeah, there's a lot of so much
oh,
shit.
rewatching it was like I had to really look internally like, Yaz, for real. Are things going on here? What's happening?
It is a dark film, but it's
Mm,
also, as you said, it's really funny.
mm,
Last episode, we talked about Truly, Madly, Deeply, and
mm.
I definitely had more laugh out moments during Train Spotting than I did that film.
Which is allegedly a romantic comedy.
Yeah. So yeah, I could see that. And Chloe, you were doing a lot of nodding there.
Yeah, I just think it's an incredible film. I'm its, newly minted biggest fan.
Welcome, welcome.
It's an amazing film, and you're completely right. I think the way that we'll talk about it in a bit, but just the way in which Danny Boyle brings so much creativity. I
Mm,
mean, there's a lot of creativity behind him in terms of
mm,
production design, costumes,
mm.
music, everything. But there's just so much to it that you could freeze frame every shot and there would be something to really look at. And it's just filmmaking in,
Yeah.
I was going to say on steroids. on, on a slightly lighter drug, and it just genuinely you watch it and I hate to quote the meme, but this is cinema.
Yes.
This is what everyone should be doing. They should be doing this rather than just anemic, sanitized nonsense.
Mm.
We should be having pure visual style thrown in our faces at all times. So I love it and I admire it, and we've got so much to say.
Honestly.
We've got so much to say, and I'll just end by saying it is a very theatrical, and I don't mean so much like theatrical as in like cinema. At one point, I'm like, I could see that this was a play,
Yeah.
even though there's a lot going on. And I'm actually shocked production design didn't get nominated because I think the production design was amazing. But Yasmin, one question I have for you before we get into it. So people are listening to this and they're like, second unit director, assistant director, AD. What is that? So yeah, tell people about what exactly do you just get coffee for the director all day?
I mean, I think you'll be hard pressed to find an AD that gets coffee for the director at all.
Yeah.
At least a first AD anyway.
That's a rotter of a question, Molly.
I'm setting her up.
No, you're all good. It's a good question because I think also because there's numbers involved in the role. Like, I had family who's like, oh yeah, you're no longer a second AD, you're the first. And it's like, all right, I respect that and the why, but it's also there's a bit more to it than just leading up from runner, third, second, first AD, crowd AD, etc., etc. So as a first AD, essentially, we're the central hub of communication for the entire production away from the producer. So producer will be the person to make sure if we need the location, if we need the cameras, if we need the cast, essentially they're managing all of the financial aspects of things and they will be the ones to book and get everything made to make the film. The director is the creative brains of what that looks like visually. If it's a narrative, your screenwriter is the person who is obviously putting words and dialogue and action and building the world through their pen to page. What the first AD's job is then to take all of that essentially and logistically plot it to make it make sense, so that if there's 6 months to make this body of work, then that's what that first AD is going to figure out based on the availability of the cast, the availability of the location. If we can only shoot in this place from 3 p.m. till midnight, then what realistically can we do? Essentially feed that back to the producer from a monetary perspective of, is this possible with the budget that we have? If not, how do we reduce these things? And if it is looking like actually it's just not feasible, then it will then effectively find its way back up the train as to maybe some of this needs to be adjusted a little bit. The AD's job is to communicate with every different department, from the electrical, so they're across all the lighting. Your second AD and your third AD, depending on budget, if someone's trying to conflate the two roles, will be across our cast, and in turn will be across your call sheet. Yeah, but all of that information can't be put on the call sheet without the first AD looking at everything and plotting it out into a wonderful schedule. So it's not as creative as a role as all of the other departments, but it is the nervous system.
So crucial.
Yeah. Nothing would happen without you.
No. And the AD, a good AD keeps the train moving. Some directors are like, we got all day. And the first AD is like, nope, we have until noon. It's over.
Pretty much. Yeah, I'm really grateful for my time as a first AD. I've had to put that part of my life to bed now, because although this wonderful hair color is matching my jumper, there are a lot of grays somewhere in the midst of all of this. And I would like to say that is predominantly due to that role and not old age, because I don't think I'm old, but stress can age you. So yeah.
I don't see any grey hairs. I think you look.
What? I like you, Chloe. Yeah, let's go with that one.
I was going to say, I can't see him either.
You look young. You look young.
What? I literally was saying, I was just born yesterday. I don't even know what you're
I
saying.
mean, we're all like 25.
Okay, I can imagine the AD on this film was probably very busy trying to make Glasgow look like Edinburgh. It takes place in Edinburgh, but a lot of it was filmed in Glasgow. And so, ladies, as we think of the film's themes, I feel like there's a lot. Yasmin, what did you think rewatching this, some of the themes of the film?
It almost felt like a really great allegory for all the reasons to not do drugs.
Yeah. Seriously, I watched this. I was like, Charlotte's going to watch this when she's 10, because I'm like, I don't want her to do drugs.
Honestly, I parts of it, I was like, this is a horror movie. This
Yes.
is it's a horror movie before its time. This is a Jordan Peele horror movie before its time. That's what I felt as I rewatched it. And I loved it. I loved every second of rewatching it. And I had to try and put aside my bias as to why I love it so much. But it's a very long, extended Talk to Frank anti-drug campaign. Legit, like.
This is so funny to hear. Do you know, what it's making me think of is, in my past life, I worked in children's books. I was a children's book editor. And when I was 12, I read a book called Junk by Melvin Burgess, which is basically the teen version of Trainspotting by Ewan Welsh, and came out in the same year that this film came out, in actual fact. And it is about a group of heroin addicts in the late 80s, but living in Bristol. Like Ewan Welsh, it's inspired by the author's friends and experiences and so on. And that was a book, it went on to win the Carnegie Medal, but it had great pushback in the press, because everyone said this is a how-to of how to take drugs. But the reality is, actually, if you read it, it's very much a warning, a stark warning about why drugs are bad, kids. And I read it at 12 and learned a lot about the preparation of heroin. But also it was, again, a stark warning to me. I was like, right, well, when I'm a bit older, I might try some drugs, but I'm never going to try heroin. So it's really funny to me, because all the kind of right-wing media at the time was like, this is like a Blue Peter how-to explainer of how to take heroin. And technically it does give you some information about it, but it warns you about the grimness and despair. And this film absolutely, I mean, it gets right into it, doesn't it? It shows you the depravity, the absolute misery and awfulness. I think that's so stark when you see, the difference between Tommy, not even just Tommy himself, but his flat.
Yes.
At the beginning, it's sort of bright and well cleaned.
This is what I was going to ask. Is he in the same flat he was before? Or is it a different?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
It would make sense from a storytelling perspective, but it's just so, as you say, it's just so different.
Yeah.
And so
It becomes
it's
a
not
hellhole, doesn't it? Yeah.
hellhole. Yeah.
And this film really does show, I mean, it's so stylized, and we can talk about that in a bit, but just that sense of the grimness, it definitely doesn't sell the lifestyle to you,
Not at all.
but it doesn't also it doesn't feel preachy at any point.
No.
It doesn't need to say drugs are bad, kids. It just needs to show you and immerse you.
Oh, it definitely shows us.
Yes.
It really shows us.
I mean, I thought it was sort of interesting also watching this. I felt like it's also a film that is countercultural and it's quite anti-conformist because it's very ironic. It's very satirical. And you've got this kind of ironic monologue about choose life, and it's obviously kind of mocking that kind of 1950s ideal of, you know, family and conformity and getting a job and doing all this stuff. And he actually kind of almost says, you know, you might think it's a bit of a DOS being a heroin addict and a bit of the soft option, but actually it's a full-time business. And that is, and you know, that kind of like that pace. But then it goes, when it moves to London, it's kind of a satire of that kind of 80s greed is good approach that is no better for the soul, just as, you know, grim. Well, not just as grim. I mean, at least you're not going to die of an overdose if you're, you know, an estate agent in London, but your soul might die.
Well, I was going to say.
Well, yeah, a different kind of overdose, maybe. But that idea of rejecting the conformist life that you're supposed to take, of checking out, refusing to be owned by the man, of playing the game, but actually they are under the control of, you know, the drugs and the drug dealers and so on. So I think that's in the book. There is, you know, it's narrated by Renton for parts of it, and he sort of says that the drug dealer who gives him the anal suppositories, he says something about how that drug dealer is like the god of his world at that moment.
And doesn't that say something? I think, to go back to your earlier question about why it's my favorite film, is like it's just really, really sophisticated in how deprecating it actually is. Literally, the whole opening, what would be like a mother's meeting knitting circle, is literally them just shooting up heroin, just as you do, you know. Just being really honest and open about the fact that everyone's lacking in moral fiber, and it almost feels like a David Attenborough documentary, just from the lens of like really hardcore heroin addicts, you know. Because why it's my favorite film is that they leave no stone unturned in terms of, we cover life, we cover death, employment, sex, clubbing,
diarrhea,
like literally
Lots of diarrhea.
the lengths people will go to, you know, theft, deception. There was, you know, little subtle betrayals. It's all in a very playful way, but it is a betrayal if you're making a cheeky sex tape with your partner, and, you know, in the heat of the moment, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to spoil it for those that are at home, but
spoil away. Yeah.
Spoiler: the sex tape is replaced with 100 best goals, and again, you couldn't think of anything worse than, you know, having to camp outside their local video, what would have been the equivalent of Blockbuster, because of the thought that actually it's been returned when actually your mate has taken it. And you can't help but wonder that if he wasn't a very hardcore heroin addict, would he have still done that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That there is no levels to like their sense of depravity and
Ethics.
and
Morality.
despite the fact that there is somewhat of a friendship circle. Is there though?
This is my thing. Like, why are these guys friends? Is it just because they happen to live in the same city and they've just known each other forever? Because they're really shitty to each other.
Really?
And even when Mark goes down to London, and Rigby, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Bigby,
thank you, comes in. I mean, I do think maybe he's kind of scared of him because he's a psychopath. But then even Johnny Lee Miller's, when he comes, he lets him in, and he clearly doesn't like these guys. They get on his nerves, and it's like, why are you letting them in? Change your locks. But it's like he can't escape it, and I almost thought it was like a theme of the circle. Like he can't escape that life. Like you can't escape drugs. and he can't escape these people no matter how hard he tries.
And they're codependent, aren't they? Because they're kind
Yes.
of, they're bonded by drugs and the need to find new drugs because it's within their little illegal network that they are finding, getting access to this stuff. And so they're kind of blood brothers, quite literally. In the book, they are talking about sharing needles and challenging each other to share needles, despite the fact that HIV is, rife. And so there's this sort of aspect of they're egging each other on, but they are literally kind of trapped with each other in this awful kind of sickening codependence. And so the ending is allegedly Renton making his escape and literally having to leave the country because it wasn't enough to just leave Scotland and go to London. He has to get a passport and get on a plane to who knows where. So they do seem to be absolutely trapped with each other.
And I get it. It feels not just codependent, but like the sheer resentment of it all, sick boy. The fact that even he just can so easily go cold turkey and then, step back in. But I would even venture to question, can he really though? Because if you genuinely are cold turkey, there is no reason to go back. The fact that he does, it's another layer to his character that he's a bit of an arrogant asshole, to be honest with you. Like there is no superiority to drug usage. Addiction is addiction. And I love the fact that Ewan McGregor, Renton, actually highlights the fact that when at his very first attempt to go cold turkey, having his almost checklist of rations and, necessary paraphernalia, the various different buckets for various different projectiles, and mentioning that the Valium is the key to it. But from a domesticated lens, his mum is a more acceptable drug addict. I thought was a really, really important thing to highlight because actually the conversation about casual alcohol consumption and what that is in terms of addiction and the things that society will happily turn a blind eye to, but have a guy carrying around his trusty spoon and we all turn our nose up. Understandably, because but at the same time, I think why Trainspotting ticks literally all of the boxes for me is Danny Boyle holds nothing back in terms of just everything is the most deplorable, lowest of the lows you can think of. It's shit. It's not glamorous. It's not fun. Again, jumping around storyline a little bit because I mentioned, we cover life, we cover death, we cover employment. No one's in their right mind. I mean, Renton probably still would have made the same choices even if he was sober, but how he dealt with that whole situation and finding out he slept with an underage teen is still, come on now. Do you know what I mean? There's just so many things that it really speaks to that level of drug usage and that level of being completely disassociated from just a baseline of functionality is always just going to end up being a shit show. No pun intended.
Yeah. Well, oh God. Yeah, we got to get into the shit, literally, because I was grossed out. But yeah, I will say, once he found out she was underage, he was like, no, we can't do this. We can't do this. But yet he would still obviously fantasize about her. Danny Boyle said in an interview at the time, it's a new awareness of these type of characters. You can't try and overemphasize the importance of film. It plays a pretty small part in people's lives. But for that time, you have to tell your story and your characters with honesty, really, and don't back away from some things we may not want to confront, which is these people belong in our human perspective just as much as anyone else, even though a lot of people would prefer to sideline them. Hearing what you said and thinking about what he said there, and acceptable forms of addiction, because even when Bergby and Tommy, the beginning, they're like, well, you shouldn't take that shit into your body. And they're smoking cigarettes. And that was very poignant, very of Boyle to make that comment of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in our society.
What do we think about the tone? Because it's an interesting one. It's very, I think, I've said before, it's heavily ironic. It's satirical. As we've said before, it's really funny throughout. It's laugh out loud funny. So it never kind of gets too depressing, despite the fact that it is looking at literally the darkest things. But then it does somehow, to my mind, it somehow manages to get into a really serious tone, really, a great tragedy without suddenly feeling like it's doing a weird sort of hard left turn or anything. It just somehow, it works. And I think that's possibly to do with the structure and the fact that it's quite freewheeling, and it's held together with this voiceover narration from Renton. About 20 minutes in, we see that the baby Dawn has died, perhaps from neglect. I mean, literally a baby hanging about with a bunch of heroin addicts in in a squat, not a safe place for a baby. And this baby dies, and we're cued for this with the narration, with, you know, saying absolute worst thing can happen, and it's going to happen. And then you see this absolutely heart-wrenching sequence in which the mother is screaming. She's screaming and screaming and screaming, and eventually they kind of stir themselves and then see the baby.
Yeah. And can we just do like a health warning
Oh,
at the moment
yes.
about what we're
Yeah,
talking
massive
about?
trigger warning. Yeah.
Because that scene for me, I mean, I think life is highs and lows. Like sometimes, you know, you're at a funeral and you're so sad, but something makes you laugh. The silliest things make you laugh, or thinking about the person makes you laugh. I've had funny things happen at a funeral, actually, but that's just life. Like life is highs and lows. And I think that's what's beautiful about this film is even in the darkest moments, it's really funny. But when we're talking about that scene, so warning, what I'm about to say, maybe skip ahead 30 seconds, I don't know, a minute. That was horrific for me. I think I probably would watch this film again if it weren't for that scene. And Yasmin, I'd be curious to know what you think, because I think you still could have gotten everything else across without showing the body. And I think you could have just, you know, had the camera down. You just see the crib, you see everybody looking into it, but never showing the body. And if I hadn't had to finish it, I don't know if I would have. But I guess on like one hand, I'm like, this is horrific. On the other hand, I guess maybe that's the point, is like these people are so out of it. And then they just go back to shooting up again. But I was just like, why are you showing this? And I was actually glad my husband was going to try to watch it with me, but he couldn't. And I told him afterwards, like, I'm glad you didn't. You wouldn't have been able to handle it. I don't know, Yasmin, what are your thoughts about that scene and them showing that?
I think it's actually a necessary choice. It's because it is so horrific that it is necessary. I think, although it's a very mild example, if you think about cigarette smokers, they have the most obscene pictures of like debilitated lungs. This is what the cause of lung cancer is. Don't buy. You know, that's effectively their disclaimer, is we are telling you in very graphic images, these are all the reasons to not smoke cigarettes, but people still choose to do it, and they've managed to have a psychological bypass to just do it anyway. And I feel that without that image with the baby, and you know, the asphyxiation of baby, is to suddenly feel like, oh, what's a bit of shit, you know, yeah, he's in the toilet, but it's fantasy, you know, it's fiction, it's not real life. I think the overdose scenes, like, there are so many really horrific depictions, but they still somehow come out the other side on top. I think that's the one image that you cannot justify it. There is no way
Yes.
around it. It is the only thing that truly is a real firm, this is why you should not do this, because. And I think safeguarding our eyes and our psyche from it is that sometimes, and this is what I was saying, it feels like it's a horror film, is it is almost shock therapy of, this is the worst image that you will probably never see again in your life, but it's important that you see it, because otherwise, what is the thing to stop you from saying, it's not glamorous, but that's probably just them. They don't know what they're doing. I might try it and I'll be absolutely fine. Now in today's society, I don't think I don't think that, you know, Danny would be able to get away with such an image. But I think
Yeah.
for its time, I think that was a really, really powerful choice. And not just for idle scare tactics, but actually as a real disclaimer to say, please take care of your health, because your choices don't just impact yourself, they impact others as well.
Yeah, but then like we never see the mother again. And then there was no repercussions. We never find out, was the baby buried? Did they just get rid of the body? Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point, I think, is like, well, then we just went harder because it was so horrific.
But I think that the tragedy speaks for itself, and I think even aside from whatever message it sends, to me, it's just in and of itself this really unsparing. It is an unsparing choice to
Mm.
have to hold the camera for quite some moments on this desperately sad image. But I think, just even from an artistic point of view, it is saying, don't look away. In the same way as you might approach a film about the Holocaust or some other
Mhm.
kind of horrific thing that has been caused by human action, it feels important to see these things, not from a voyeuristic point of view, but from a point of view of this is happening and this is real. And for the first time, these characters are facing something, the consequences of their actions that are not just, it's not just their health, it is genuinely another life. So I feel like it was a brave choice and the right choice, but I completely recognize that that's not something that's going to work for many, many people in the audience. And I totally respect that it's not a film that you would want to watch again
Yeah.
for
I
that
think I would just
reason.
need to fast forward through it. Because, like, literally, I loved everything else, but I was like, oh my God. And to Boyle's credit, it was not shocking. I was like, oh shit. Every time you saw that little baby, and like
Mm.
every so often, and you're like, there's a fucking child with heroin addicts. This poor child. Like, several times in my notes, I'm like, poor baby, poor baby, poor baby. I'm like, well, God, how is she going to get over this? And then, like, she doesn't. And so when that happened, you know what has happened. And I think that goes to the storytelling, because it's
Yeah.
just like you're hoping it doesn't happen, but you know it's going to happen.
And also to your point about does it have repercussions, I think psychologically it does on Renton, because
Yeah.
it's in there in his subconscious when he has to go cold turkey later on in the
Yeah.
film. The repeated vision that he has is of this baby crawling along the ceiling. He can't get it out of his vision, and this baby is coming to him almost like a sort of revenant, telling him, "This is your doom. This is your doom, and
Yeah.
this is your fault." And he's being visited by the ghosts of his past, all these people who have been destroyed because of his actions. You know, particularly Tommy, who he got hooked on heroin, and the baby who, you know, he was just as responsible for, arguably speaking. So I feel like it is handled with a certain kind of nuance and grace, but it is obviously a heavily kind of ironic and dark film. So you have to kind of delve through these layers to
Yeah.
kind of see perhaps what the filmmakers are saying with it. And it's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Completely.
Well, and on that note, I think it's a good time to go to kind of the visualization of the film, because I think that whole scene when he's going through withdrawals, yes, it was intense, intended as such. But I thought it was so smart, because that's how he's introducing like the whole AIDS and HIV. Because I know it's silly, but at that time I was like, oh yeah, there's AIDS and HIV. They need to worry
Mm.
about that. So when you hear Tommy has it, you already kind of know before he says it, because he's introduced it during that montage. That was where I was like, oh my God, this is so theatrical. And apparently Boyle, he was influenced by the colors of Francis Bacon's paintings, which represented a
Mm.
sort of in-between land, part reality, part fantasy,
Yeah.
which tracks.
Yes. And what's your reaction to the visual style? Because I'm really interested to know, Yasmin, your thoughts and I guess how it's influenced filmmakers. Does it influence you? What's its impact since?
Massively, massively. One of the first things that I'd ever written that it didn't get made and it never saw the light of day, but it was definitely inspired by the worst toilet in Scotland scene. Not because he's delving into a toilet in shit, because that there is never a time I can watch that scene and not gag. I also feel like if listeners haven't already like started a game, take a shot every time she says shit. But literally, like, I think that was the thing that really just spun me. Like, how did you do that? How is that even
Yeah.
possible? A lot of nerding out on like behind the scenes. How did they do that videos? It's an old theatre trick.
Ah,
So essentially, what they had done to film it, we noticed we only ever see, unless it's when Ewan McGregor's physically sat on the toilet and pulling his trousers down. That's the only other time that we see like a profile of the toilet. Everything
uh,
else, in terms of him physically going into the bowl and then legs kind of twizzling around, and then we just see
yeah.
his Converses before he disappears into nothingness, is only ever from the side profile of the toilet. And that's because they've sawn the toilet seat in half. And then on the other side of that, there's like a trap floor. And they've put like a children's slide. So essentially,
Ah,
he's going down this children's slide into this kind of like a false floor. And that's what's given the illusion of him going into the toilet. So then when we
yeah.
see him come back up and then obviously he then spews out all of this water, it just adds to the effect of we, I guess, as the viewers are suspended in belief as to oh, did we just disappear into a trip with him? You know, it's clear that the slow release suppositories, opium suppositories at that, they've done their job, which is why it's a very euphoric experience for him, despite the fact he's in real time in a sewage. But again, we never know. But I love the added detail that he comes out dripping, he comes out wet, you know, and he goes back into his flat.
Yeah.
His very, very trap house flat with this
Yes.
disgusting mattress on the floor. And he's like, right, now I've got my suppositories. Now I'm really ready to go cold turkey. But without that disgusting toilet with the most wretched floor, and even just, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't know if people be eating their dinner whilst watching this, but
painting a picture.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I have literally had nightmares about that toilet. Like, I literally had nightmares about that toilet. And I will say, I'm glad I read this before I watched it, because I did scream at one point. But apparently all the shit is chocolate. It's all just melted chocolate, and it smells good.
Okay.
So
love that.
there you go.
That's all right.
Anyway, sorry, I think I interrupted you, Yasmin. You were about to say something.
Not at all. I think it just goes on to show like the real deep lengths that the production designers, like set designers, went to build this world. Because it's scuzzy, like it's actually nasty. There's not a point in the film where I didn't gag. You kind of retching as you're watching, but there's no soft landing for this film at all.
No.
And I think to even go back a step, you know, talking about the death of Baby and even how that was shot, it's still shocking, but I think it would have been worse if we didn't have the prelude of all of this other before it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of are prepared for that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also, to talk about, you know, the surreality of it, I love that. And I think there's all these wonderful touches. Obviously, the other really famous moment is when he falls into this kind of carpet-lined grave, and his view is framed by it. And apparently they put a shield on the camera to kind of create that. And then, as you were saying, Molly, like the quiz show, which is about HIV, presented by Dale Winton, which may mean nothing to Americans, but he's sort of like really light entertainer in the UK, does sort of supermarket sweep. And so there's all these amazing kind of surreal moments that, as you say, Yasmin, is taking us into this distorted viewpoint of the characters of, you know, they are high. The blurring between reality and fantasy and dreams is kind of happening. I love that. And I think it's so inventive, and it always keeps us entertained. You know, it's always keeping our eyes glued to the screen. But as you say, it is set within these utterly grotty, squalid sets, which are beautifully created. I mean, I watched a little making of thing with Cave Quinn, who's the production designer, and Rachel Fleming, she's now called Rachel MacDonald, on costumes. And they were describing all the things that they did with very little budget and very little time, because the production itself, I think, was 6 weeks, and they didn't have that much run up to it, where they're going to great lengths to create and devotion these sets. And they took over a kind of an old, I think, a cigar factory or something, and then built all these kind of mini sets within them. And they were inspired by real life derelict tenement. Apparently they'd gone scouting and found that there were holes in walls that were kind of punched through by the tenants. And so they recreated that on set. They got Glasgow School of Art students to do art on the walls. They found period wallpapers. You know, they did a lot. Apparently they spent a lot of focus on the ceilings and finding ways to make that light, because the characters are lying on their backs a lot of the time. We get a lot of point of view shots. So they put so much energy into creating these utterly grotty, horrible sets that feel real life. But, you know, Molly always says that she loves a film when the set design feels lived in.
Yeah.
This feels lived in, but not quite in the way that you maybe
yeah. It's not
want. Bit too lived in, died in as well.
I am just shocked that this film was not nominated for Best Production Design, at least at BAFTAs. And I'm looking as you're talking, I'm listening, but the nominations for that year, Richard III was the winner, The English Patient, Evita, and Hamlet. I don't know, like, I'm just looking at that list and I'm like, you could have added Trainspotting.
Yeah.
I don't know that they could have.
No? Okay.
Do you know why I say that? Even that whole list, I remember my dad dragging me to the cinema to watch Evita in real time. And it was too sophisticated for my 7-year-old palate. I hated every second of it. It felt long and boring. Me as an adult now, I can appreciate that, but those are all very we are thespian type screenplays.
Yes.
And there's no way in hell that Trainspotting could have fit into that list,
This is
because
true.
clearly there was a level of elitism happening in film at that time that said, we cannot possibly glorify a film like this. So to fit amongst that list, I just don't think that society as a time was brave enough. And I think that's also why Trainspotting for me is an incredible film, because it is so brave. You know, it's not trying to be Evita. It's not trying to be Richard III. It just is a very real and unfortunately very universal story. And it's not glamorous. And there's not a single person that I know other than Danny Boyle that would probably want to tell it. Pulp Fiction, even the way they kind of tackle drug usage, it's still sexy. There's nothing about this drug usage that is sexy. It's disgusting. It's deplorable. But you can't look away.
It's very British.
Yeah, it's very British.
It's British, isn't it? I think that's the thing, is that I think maybe huge generalization time, but I think maybe artistically, the Brits, compared to Americans, are maybe more willing to, or at the time were more willing to create art about the unmentionable, the dark side, that kind of thing. It's not aspirational, it's reality. And that was Irvine Welsh's vision, I think. It's his debut novel, and he comes fresh to the scene with this kind of incredible vision of this world that is not part and parcel of the established literary scene. I think he was shortlisted or longlisted for the Booker, but apparently didn't win it due to the sensibilities of a couple of the judges. And it's written in Scots, and it's rejection of the kind of classical canon. And then Danny Boyle brings it to the screen, and it's its own thing. I completely agree with you, Yasmin. It is its own beast. And it's this exercise in extreme subjectivity. There's so much stylization to all the framings, but there's so much artistry and thought and care that has gone to every single shot, into every single detail within the shot, that to me it is a crime that it was overlooked. Definitely. And it is probably due to the fact that people can't see past the fact that it's about this really grotty,
snobbery,
horrible, it's scuzzy in the extreme. And yet the care and attention that has gone into every little bit of peeling wallpaper on the ceiling, every single, the costumes, they might have been bought, they might have been vintage, but the costume designer was re-dyeing them to make them look like they'd been worn and worn again. And the care and thought that went into every kind of choice in how each of the characters are dressed. They're not beautiful costumes most of the time, but it's really thought through. And I think it's that deliberateness of it that I think is incredible. I mean, can we talk, Yasmin? You're gonna know far more about this than we do. But can we talk about like the framing and the camera moves? I mean, just the way in which the shots, often they're very low. There's a shot near the beginning where the camera pans around the squat at a very low angle, like it draws attention to itself. You're like, again, this is cinema. I am watching a film. I'm not just watching, as you say, it's not just a documentary. It's got a point of view. And there's so many cheeky little visual tricks. It never feels overloaded because it's humorous. And often they're shot from below, I noticed, or they'll have there's almost like a fisheye lens. There's a sort of forced perspective. I guess that's saying something about how distorted and alternative their world is. What do you think is kind of the choices behind those visual framings?
I think everything you've said, and clearly Danny just wanted to have fun with it. It's something that looks like he just had a lot of fucking fun making it. You spoke to the low angle, but also there's a lot of high angle shots as well, because you mentioned earlier that they spend most of the film kind of laid on their back in this state of like euphoria, however short-lived it is. And we do have a lot of aerial shots to kind of depict that. And I think why it's really, really important, there's almost this power shift with our camera angles as well. Even when they're talking about Bigby at the pool table, it is quite low angle. It's just a little bit lower than eye level for him playing pool. And that whole thing of he's completely missed the shot before he goes, mad and starts glassing the guy and
Yeah.
smashing him up with the pool stick. You mentioned earlier Brenton, after his parents kind of take him home from ODing and being left on the ground outside the hospital. There's almost this sequence in his really shabby flat that looks like an old school Jamiroquai video, because the
Yes.
bed is moving, and I know the way they shot that Jamiroquai video was they basically just built like a hollow set in terms of the walls were on wheels.
Mm.
So they were just moving around the four walls around, so the bed stayed.
Mm.
And so from a camera perspective, it looks like Danny had done something really similar with that. And I think Danny having fun with, again, you mentioned the fisheye, the low angles, there's a lot of kind of quick cuts and things that keep it fast paced, because
Yeah.
actually it is a sensory experience. It is very surrealist. It is very experimental. And I guess that's what drug usage is. I really liked the simplicity of the club scene because it's one of the few things in the film that felt normal.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And it's weird that it's like, this is the calm before the storm, because everyone's dabbling in every type of drug you can think of. We've got pill popping happening. They've had a quick dab of some kind of powder substance. People are smoking fags. I'm sure they've shot up before they've gone into the club. But again, the real sensory overload at that point is the music. It's one of the first times that, even though they've got these really thick Glaswegian accents, we have subtitles because the
Oh
music is
yeah.
so loud. You have to pay
Yes.
really hard attention or watch the subtitles for. And again, it's like every single thought on camera was clearly really intentional by Danny, and he just had fun. You can see
Yeah.
every part of it was just something that, if it had been a really dark and moody piece, I think it would have been too difficult for anybody to stomach. I don't think the film would have done well. I think that the comedic aspects of it and the quick nature of how witty they are required camera movement and choices that were just as fun as the comedic beats and just as tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I think it keeps it lighthearted in a way that we can watch a really heart-wrenching scene of a dead baby on the floor, which is even a mad thing to say out loud. Do you know what I mean? Like, watching a scene like that and still being able to finish watching the film to the end without walking out, that is only something that can be achieved when you have the expertise and confidence to just play around, and do different things with camera
Yeah.
angles.
Yeah, that word confidence feels so key. Like, this is a filmmaker at the start of his career, and he is pulling off trick after trick after trick, and often for humor. The fact that there's a smash cut from them, what they're taking, like speed or something,
Yeah.
before Spud's interview, and then smash
Yeah.
cut to him high as a kite in his interview, motor mouth, and absolutely crashing his interview. And there's a lovely, lovely cut where, after he's allegedly sobered up, Renton jumps from a wall and then lands. You see the shot of his feet landing back in Mother Superior's drug den. And so there's that just constant invention. It's the inventiveness that I love. It's just so exciting.
That's Boyle. I mean, even on 28 years later, I don't know if you guys saw any of this, but he was using iPhones. He created this contraption with like 28 iPhones to film some of those scenes. So Boyle is definitely a director that likes to experiment. And, you see that throughout his body of work. I do have to say, even though I'm better now, I did really appreciate those subtitles at the club. As an American, I was like, finally, I know exactly everything they're saying. And I kind of chuckled. I think you guys will too, because apparently prior to its release in the U.S., Miramax, the film's U.S. distributor, requested that some of the dialogue be dubbed so the film would be easier to understand for American viewers unfamiliar with Scottish slang and British slang in general. I don't know if they actually did.
But it is in a dialect. They are talking in a
Yeah.
dialect, in fairness. So, and they're making references to things that an American would have no hope of knowing.
Yes.
about.
And Burby was the only one I had a hard time understanding. I don't
Begbie.
know.
Yeah, Robert Carlyle's character. Yeah, he's got a strong accent. Yeah,
Very.
I mean, he's also a psychopath. Apparently, he thought he was too small for the role, and Boyle said, no, small psychopaths are better.
yeah. I mean, we've all seen Small Dogs.
Yes, exactly. Well, we started talking about the music. Like you already said, Yasmin, that when they actually were in clubs, I'm like, yes, I relate to this. I know this scene. And they're dealing with sexuality in the club scenes when he's in London, which I thought was very nuanced. And it wasn't like, this is now about a sexuality film. It was just like, yeah, it's no big deal. Moving on. But is there anything else we want to say about music?
I just think it's one of the most amazing soundtracks. It is timeless. I think my music taste is very eclectic anyway, but that's one of the few where just everything was the perfect was placement. I think Ewan McGregor going through his whole overdose sequence and us hearing a very
Love
melodic
it.
choir singing "You reap what you sow." It couldn't be more perfect if it tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in the club scene we just mentioned, Temptation, just I think everything was very well placed and clearly very intentional, and it
Mm.
just makes it a lot more fun to watch.
I can't believe they managed to clear such an incredible soundtrack
Mm.
by absolute legends, which I will list just for the sake of completeness in a
Go
moment.
on.
How did Film 4 afford it? I just don't know.
Do you know who their music supervisor was?
No.
Boyle.
Oh,
He chose all the music.
well, that
And
makes sense. But how did they have the money?
he worked with his producer to get it all cleared. And
Wow.
he ended up being the music video director for Iggy Pop.
Ah,
Of
yes.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Boyle's like, no, I want the music that I want for this. And so he
Yeah,
didn't,
and
you know,
it-
traditionally you'd have a music supervisor doing all this. Nope. It
Mm.
was Boyle.
I
Mm.
mean, it is to me possibly, is it the greatest soundtrack of the 90s? I think it could be.
Strong contender.
It is amazing. You know, you've
Yeah.
got Iggy Pop, you've got Brian Eno, you've got Primal Scream, New Order, Blondie, Bowie, Blur, Lou Reed, Pulp, Left Field, and of course Underworld. Underworld is, I think, perhaps the most famous contributors to the soundtrack from it
Mm.
because they have Born Slippy. Nux is the most famous piece of music, arguably. And I love that. I listen to a lot of this music anyway, so for me, it has not aged a day. But Underworld's Born Slippy is such an incredible piece of music because it's inspired by Carl Hyde, the vocalist's experiences with alcoholism. And the lyrics really kind of evoke that sense of loss of control, disorientation. I read that they had to be persuaded to license it because they were always a bit alarmed that this piece of music, which is meant to be reflecting on losing control and the horror of addiction, was kind of becoming an anthem for drinking. And so they had to be persuaded that no, this is going to be used in a film that's got a point of view about addiction. But it's become so synonymous with that film, I think. And the fact it kind of moves from this kind of more punk rock era into what Diane talks about, this new era of music. It's sort of telling a story with that. The other thing I think is very key moment in terms of soundtrack is the use of Bizet's Carmen. It soundtracks the worst toilet in the world scene, worst toilet in
Yes.
Scotland, but probably in the world, because it's such a witty, funny use of this ironic classical score where Renton's sitting, he's getting together all of his, as you said, all of his items to go cold turkey. And then he's buying opium suppositories to take off the edge and then going to the worst toilet in Scotland. And so it just adds this deeply comical effect. And so it softens the fact that we are looking at, like, the screen is full of shit with this elevated opera soundtrack. It's so funny.
It's really, really intelligent. It's something that I think the score underpins really, really well, that it should feel obvious because of what it is, but I'm going to take it there. I think it feels, well, I guess for 1996 anyway, I think it felt really ahead of its time because it's showing an all-white cast having an absolute nightmare with drug addiction. And I think why I mention race in particular with that is the music underpins that beautifully. But I mention it specifically because all of them are pretty much working class. But I think up until that point, from my understanding anyway, we only ever saw maybe homeless people depicted in such a way, and it would be predominantly other demographics. And so I think there's something about that. And that thought occurred to me when we were talking about the BAFTA nominations for production design of that year. And it's like, actually, yeah, that's not a depiction of anything that anybody would want to see or be attached to, because it feels, why would we want to celebrate this? But I think what the music does a really fantastic job of doing is it doesn't make anybody feel guilty. I feel like the music is so on point and so sick that you're dancing your way through a really miserable tale and a really heavy story,
Yeah.
but it feels light. And it feels light not just because of the comedy, but because of the music. And I think that's a really hard and quite complex thing to do well. And Danny does it.
Yeah. To build on your point, that thing of like, we're not used to seeing the down and outs of society, as it were, perhaps. And often film it focuses on aspirational characters. And this is a film that looks at the grit and grime of many people's lives. Irvine Welsh grew up in that environment to some degree, in the sort of tenements, probably not necessarily with kind of drug addicts and things, but he lived that life for a while because he was in a punk band called the Pubic Lice, apparently. And he did use heroin for a while, so he knows that world. But I love the fact this film does not want to just show you it in an obvious way. So I mean, just a key detail is the fact the costume designers were told by Danny Boyle he doesn't want the characters to be dressed the way you'd expect. Let's not lean into a depiction of people who are drug addicts in a stereotypical way. And I think that says so much about the film.
Yeah. Amen to everything you all said. And also, I think the performances lead into a lot of that. The producer, as we said at the top, Ewan McGregor was the guy. And according to Boyle, apparently, for the role of Renton, they wanted somebody with the quality of Michael Caine's character, Alfie, Elkins and Alfie, and Malcolm McDowell's character, Alex DeLarge, in A Clockwork Orange. Repulsive.
Yeah.
Repulsive with a charm that makes you feel deeply ambiguous about what he's doing. McGregor hits that on the nail. I
Yeah.
mean, like, if it was because the guy who played Spud was Renton in the play. But I don't think if he played Renton in the film, I don't think it would have worked as well.
No.
It is interesting. I wonder if I had seen this before, before I knew who Ewan McGregor was, or before he was Obi-Wan Kenobi. But for me, I was just like watching him, and I was putting up with as a viewer, you're putting up with a lot of shit that he's doing, and you kind of want to be like, come on, Renton, you're better than this. But also, actually, is he better than this? But I think that is the charm of him and the writing and the direction that makes you continue to keep watching, and if anything, root for him to just get out of this.
Yeah. I love that he was referencing Malcolm McDowell's character from Clockwork Orange, because there is, I think, a very obvious Clockwork Orange reference in the club scene, because they've got the lettering on the walls looks exactly, to my mind, like some of the lettering from Clockwork Orange. So I think that was a kind of intentional link. But yeah, it's really interesting because that film, again, Clockwork Orange, I mean, I think Kubrick actually tried to get it removed from cinemas, didn't he? He made it and then was like, what have I created? And he had death threats.
Was that the case? I thought he was banned.
Maybe he was banned. But I think that he actually got to a point where he had so much backlash that he was the one that tried to get it removed. And it was this kind of deeply, and because it was such a challenging film, I mean, I often think what a miracle that film is how did it get made? Because it's such a challenging film.
Yeah.
And Trainspotting is kind of going into that same territory. So yeah, they totally share DNA.
Though going back to what I think you both were saying, is I think for me, I don't know, I'm going to say something controversial. I think where this may be a little bit more successful than Clockwork Orange is, again, the levity. And I don't know. I don't remember watching. It's been a while since I've watched Clockwork Orange, but I don't remember laughing out loud at Clockwork Orange. I was mostly horrified watching that film.
Yeah, same.
But this, again, this is a message to any screenwriter and playwright, because there's definitely some plays out there that are just brutal to watch, and you can't just put your audience through brutality constantly and expect them to stay with you. Audiences do not have to stay with you. They can walk out or they can stop.
Yeah.
And that's also not me saying you need to sanitize everything. I don't want things sanitized. But what is so successful at this film is the brutality and the levity. As I said, I was just laughing out loud at things. And I think maybe even some things more, because I live here, I kind of get Scotland suck. I don't even hate English. They're all wankers. But, we were conquered by wankers. And like, that was just so funny to me. And I don't know if I would have appreciated that as much before I moved here. Real quick. Yes. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange was famously withdrawn from distribution in the UK by the director himself in 1974 following reports of copycat violence and
See?
threats against his family. While not
Mm.
technically banned by the government, it was effectively unavailable in the UK for nearly 30 years until after Kubrick's death.
That's mad.
It is incredible, isn't it? Do we want to move on to talking about what's aged badly or well?
I think so.
Yasmin, do you feel there's anything that's aged badly or aged really well?
I don't know that I have an answer for this. And it's difficult because I've watched the film so many times at different junctures in my life that I think if I'd had a really long hiatus of not having watched it, I think I would be a little bit more better placed to answer this. The only thing that I could probably say that from maybe an external lens, I think the death of our baby is probably one step too far. I don't see a world in which that could be justified in the now. I think that's only something that could have existed in the early 90s. And I don't necessarily know that it's aged badly per se, but just I think it would be done with a different level of care now.
Yeah. What about you,
Mm.
Chloe?
I, like Yasmin, feel like it's a bit of a false question because it is such a darkly ironic commentary on the sort of maybe late 90s. It's not taking anything for granted. All of the reprehensible things that the characters do, and that is probably pretty much 97% of what they do. It's not something that the film is even necessarily taking a view on it because it understands, it accepts that its audience are grown-ups and it can show you these things and then allow you to take a view on it. I think it's just a very clear-eyed film. And so I think it doesn't feel the need to kind of cosset you as an audience and comment on it. It just shows you this extreme neglect and cruelty and violence and then just sort of lets you take a view on it. And so I feel like it's not a case of where in previous films we've kind of gone, oh, that's extremely sexist.
Yeah.
But they probably gave that a pass and thought it was really funny or whatever. Instead, this is a film that is kind of just presenting you with this hell in many ways.
Yeah.
And then letting you get on with it. In terms of what I sort of feel like that's not really a question to answer. But I would say that in terms of the filmmaking, it has aged brilliantly because of the fact that this is a film with a point of view that is made with deliberateness and care and has this visual style. So even though it feels like a time capsule and it's got, like metallic eyeshadow and tinted sunglasses and things, it doesn't feel dated. It's just its own thing.
Yeah.
And I also think, and this is my soapbox, all the effects are done in camera.
Yes.
And that's why it feels amazing.
Yeah.
Because if you did things like, for example, that grave in the carpet scene, if you did that with CG, as you probably would now for some reason, it just wouldn't, I don't know, it would just feel a bit sort of lightweight, I would argue.
I think it'd be terrible.
It's done with an actual sort of theatrical prop, a bit like they did with the toilet scene. They actually built a trapdoor and a kind of sort of lift for him to fall down in. They had people pulling the carpet. And it just looks great. And they didn't have visual effects like CGI in those days. So they did because they had Jurassic Park, I know. But they did it practically and it looks amazing.
Yeah.
And you can't beat it.
Agreed.
Has anybody seen T2 Trainspotting, the 2017 sequel?
I refuse to watch it.
Okay. Why?
So my soapbox,
Yes.
when I feel like a movie is perfect or is close to perfect, I tend to come away feeling devastatingly disappointed by the second offering of a thing. If there's a third, then I will go back and watch the second. But as it stands, people were campaigning for the sequel for an absolute decade. And I think by the time T2 came out, everyone was a lot more mature in age. I'm being as kind as I can here, but I think, you know what I mean? Like, I had zero interest in it. And it's also what can you possibly tell us from how, and I'm sure if you guys have watched it, you can prove me wrong, but I've yet to be sold reasons to watch T2, especially given how dire their lives were. So unless you're going to show me everybody getting clean or the effects of that, I don't want to take away from what feels very magical from that original body of work. For
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of films out there that I'm like, why is that sequel coming? Because the story is done. I bring it up because to Chloe's point is I do wonder, I just don't see Boyle using CGI. And so I was just wondering if anybody had seen it, if they if they had used it. And I would even argue with this film, if you had told me this came out in 99, I would believe you because I think some of what it does is very, I think somebody said it was ahead of its time, but probably influenced, obviously later filmmaking. And I think you're both right. This is a hard question to ask. We ask it because we have to. We don't have to, but we do on this podcast. The only thing that I could come up with aged well or terribly is, and I actually, maybe this is more of a moment, like 90s moment, was, and I don't know how I feel about it, is the whole gun scene. And maybe it's because I'm American. Like today, if somebody, and I know it's a BB gun, but they're like, they're in the park and they have a BB gun, and I'm like, why is no one like arresting them? But I think that's as me as an American. And I think everybody's like, oh, those lads, they just have a BB gun. I don't know how well that's aged, or I don't know. It was just a comment. It was just an observation.
I actually agree with you. Do you know what? Now you've said that, I don't know why that completely escaped me. When I rewatched it ahead of us recording, I did think to myself, why was that in the script in the first place? Yeah. And I think that's the first time I've ever had that thought. No, I don't even think it's an American thing. I think maybe just because everything in the film is so shock, it buried into your psyche a little bit, the back of your psyche. But yeah, I would actually agree with that point. I don't know that that's aged very well. I don't know why it's there.
Yeah. And now we go on to most 90s moment, line, or scene. We kind of already talked about this. You're probably not going to be surprised. I said the music. The music in a good way, the techno, the punk. What's really cool about the music is, and I was thinking this, I think it was when you were talking, Chloe, is it kind of takes you through the 90s. It kind of takes you from like early 90s. This is in 96, so like mid 90s. And you can see where it's going. And even, Renton says that, like things are changing. And you hear that in the music. And it was just very 90s. It puts you in this place. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. For me, I mean, obviously, Spud's yellow tinted sunglasses, T-shirts, the London clubbing scene, the VHSs lined up along the wall.
Yes.
I think that just takes me back because you needed a lot of space for your physical media in those days. And then also a thing that sort of took me back was the scene where after he's got clean, he's sitting in the bingo hall and he's sort of disassociated due to sheer boredom. And everyone starts to move faster on time lapse. And so they're sped up whilst he's sitting still. And that is a visual effect that I feel like has been used in 1,000 90s music videos. And I feel like maybe Texas had a music video with that or something, but it feels like a very 90s thing, a bit like glass brick walls. Just we had a passion for that. So you just see it a lot, and you kind of go, oh, the 90s.
Yeah. Did you have anything, Yasmin? Anything that was like very 90s for you?
I feel like you've both just kind of really nicely summed it all up, to be honest with you. And I think that's actually the thing that I love the most about the film is I love a period piece that's set in the 90s. I think it's just a really special time and there isn't anything else that looks like it. I think most fashion choices are quite cyclical, but the 90s seems to have its own very unique style, even if there's little, tidbits from the 80s kind of in there. So yeah, I think everything you've said, the music, the wardrobe, the camera usage, everything just feels really, really peak 90s. I'm very much in love with it.
Yeah. I will say the youth today is trying to bring back 90s fashion, and I don't know how I feel about it.
I'm enjoying it.
90s is one thing, but the early noughties, I think, can stay there.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. But their suits, I felt particularly towards the end when they do the drug deal and they're in their suits and Ewan McGregor's estate agent suit, it's very boxy and kind of wide. And I just felt like that's a look that we have moved on from very much so.
I think for the better. I want to give this an award. There are a lot to choose from in this film, but for me, for the worst shit moment, the worst feces moment, something I didn't think I'd say, but the worst was Spud flinging all of his shit over his girlfriend and his girlfriend's parents. I literally, once again, was like, ah! I literally screamed. Like, no. And you knew it, again, you knew it was coming. You're like, oh no. No. And it was still like shocking when it happened because it's just so gross.
It is funny. It had to happen though.
Yeah.
Had to happen.
Do you have any awards, Chloe?
I have a couple. I have the Is That Jessica Stevenson Award for Jessica Stevenson.
Where
she
was
is one
she?
of the interviewees. She's
Oh.
one of the
Yeah!
interviewers of Spud. And I went, oh, is that? And it is. I love Jessica Stevenson because of her work in Spaced, which is not like Trainspotting, but it kind of is in that it's that kind of scuzzy British down at heel kind of, visual look. And it's the opposite of aspirational. So I love that. I also have is that Dale Winton Award for his pivotal moment as the HIV quiz show host, which is a brilliant, like visually the way they've done it with that kind of videotape effect is incredible. And then maybe the best outfit, Kelly MacDonald's sequin dress,
Yes.
which apparently is from Kukai, which is very 90s. Brilliant. And then I think my best use of music is actually the Underworld's song, but not actually the one at the end, not Born Slippy, but the one from the Come Down scene, which I think is actually kind of really beautiful the way it's done. It's just it's thumping away throughout. And the piece of music is called Dark and Long Dark Train. Brackets dark train, so obviously you can see they kind of went for the train thing there, but it works so well under his hallucinations and everything.
And we got to say, Kelly MacDonald, we really didn't talk about her much. She wasn't actually in it as much as I thought she would be, not going in, but this is her first film. They found her by all the casting department flyered through clubs and bars.
Street casting.
Yes, street casting. Yes. And she was a bartender, saw it, came in, and they hired her because they needed somebody who was 19, legal, but could pass as a 15-year-old or an underage.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is her first film, and look what she's done, where she's been.
Amazing.
Yeah, she is a great, great actress. Yasmin, have any awards?
I think the only award that I had was like the best what the F moment was our baby crawling on the ceiling. Like there's never a time,
Yeah.
of all the shock value things that we see, that's the one that literally is like,
What is happening? Yeah.
what is happening?
And
here?
it's got an Exorcist
Oh, and
reference
yeah,
as well,
yeah,
isn't
the
it?
whole
Because the
twisted
baby's head
yeah,
turns around.
I think that's the only time I'm
So-
tripped out.
And it's like bloated.
Yeah.
That's my only award.
But it is like the demon from his nightmares.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it works.
But yeah, we could talk about this forever. And Yasmin, what would you recommend somebody watch after this? Or if they can't get a hold of this for whatever reason, what would you recommend someone watch? If they like this, whether it be like a vibe, the actor, the writing, the director.
That is a really good question. I think if you want something that's trippy as well, but also feels light, I don't think it's 90s. I think it's just very early 2000s. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, good call. Yeah.
I think that's got also a really cool amount of visually just stunning
Yes.
things, great thematically, great characterization. There's a lot happening. You have to keep up.
Yes.
Not in a way
Yeah.
that feels exhausting or like, God, what the hell am I watching? But even if there are things that maybe feel a bit more somber than heavy, it still feels like by the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think Michel Gondry, who made that, do you think he was influenced by Trainspotting? Because it definitely has that feel of being really visually inventive and using in-camera effects and just doing some really kind of gonzo stuff.
I mean, I definitely think he was also on some kind of hallucinogen. So yeah, man, sure. No, I think that there's something really cathartic about it in a way that feels really beautiful. So yeah, if there were any form of influence, I wouldn't be surprised.
What about you, Chloe?
I have a few. I mean, I will quickly mention a couple of addiction films. So actually not about hard drugs, but about alcoholism. So The Outrun, which came out a couple years ago,
Yeah.
which is based on a novel by Amy Liptrot. It's got Saoirse Ronan as Amy. It's a memoir, and it's about a young woman. She's Scottish, and she has gone to London. She's lost her way. She has become an alcoholic, and then she goes back to her parents' farm to dry out, basically. And it's just a really great, very realistic, very honest portrayal of addiction, but not nearly as scuzzy as Trainspotting. Beautiful performances. And there's a wonderful moment where she goes to the local offie. There's only one on the island where she lives. And she buy some essentials, and then the shopkeeper says, "Do you want anything else?" And they don't even show you what she's looking at. You just see her eyes obviously scanning the rows of bottles of alcohol behind the shopkeeper, and you can see this internal battle going on in her head. She's so tempted at the moment to throw it all away. So beautiful depiction of addiction, tonally very different. And then I also think Another Round is a Danish film that explores alcohol addiction, but in a very different way, but sort of very Danish sensibility and there's humour to it.
Yeah.
And then I was also thinking of Wonderland, which I haven't seen in an absolute age in a day, but it's a Michael Winterbottom film. And I think it has that, again, it's just a inventive British film that has a kind of looseness and down-to-earthness and point of difference. And I just always remember all these kinds of tracking shots. And to me, it just felt like what British filmmaking can be when it, even if it's low budget. So I feel like Michael Winterbottom and Danny Boyle, they're different filmmakers, but they are kind of great British filmmakers.
Great. For me, I hesitate to recommend this, but if you're like, I want to get down on this and see more drug addicts ruining their lives,
As you do,
then definitely Requiem for a Dream. That's kind of like an American lens on this. Darren Aronofsky, 2000.
And it has a surreality,
The
doesn't
area
it?
surreality, Jared Leto, Jennifer Connelly, Ellen Burstyn. And I think Ellen Burstyn, she definitely got a nomination. I don't think she won an Oscar nomination, but I don't think she won. I think that one may be a harder watch than this, actually, because I don't remember, again, laughing too much. And I think I might have been traumatized after Requiem. But again, if you're like, I'm down for this, I want to see how people ruin their lives, there you go. But if you want something lighter and another film that's very quintessentially British and much more recent, I would recommend Attack the Block. So it's very different in the fact that these people are fighting aliens and not heroin addiction. It's a sci-fi film taking place in South London. But again, there's that distinctive British working class perspective. It's not a film I would have watched if I had lived in America. It was one of the first films I watched after I moved here, but it's distinctively British, and Trainspotting is distinctively British. And it's a much lighter film. John Boyega's in it, so from Star Wars fame, but of many, many, many other amazing films. Jodie Whittaker, who is probably best known as Doctor Who, but she has a plethora of other film roles and television roles. So that's Attack the Block. So I think I know the answer to this question, Yasmin, but on this show, we are rewatching 90s films and we're asking ourselves, are these really as good or as bad as we remember or as their reputation implies? So, Yasmin, as you rewatched this, was this as good or bad as you remembered?
it was fantastic, but I was shocked, and I don't shock easy. So I think it's just as good as I remembered. And I think even as an adult and understanding the ramifications of what I'm watching, even more so, I'm still like, what an amazing film.
Chloe?
Well, I think it is a stone cold classic. It's one of those films I put into a time capsule to send to the aliens. I don't know where the aliens are, but here is a piece of British culture. It's one of the few things that makes me feel proud to be British, in as much as that
Chloe.
wonderful inventiveness of filmmaking as opposed to the drug addiction. I need to clarify that.
What kind of
But
message do you want to send to the aliens about Britain?
I want to say that even in our darkest aspects of our humanity, the Brits can create amazing art. That's what I want to say.
Sure.
We're so inventive with shit, but I just think it's an amazing film, and it's definitely worth watching. I had a subpar viewing experience because I was watching it streaming on my TV with lots of interruptions, and I can imagine if I could see this with proper stereo sound in a cinema, I would be fully immersed. But even despite my terrible viewing experience, I watched it and I was like, this is incredible. Every shot is an amazing picture. Might not be a picture you want to put on your wall, but it is an incredible work.
Well, some of them are quite pretty. Like when the red when he descends down into the floor is quite beautiful. It'd be a good Prince Charles cinema.
Ooh.
Yeah, right? I think this is, I say this definitely lives up to its reputation. I was coming into it like, will it? I don't know. It definitely lives up to its reputation. I think watch it with care on certain scenes and just know that that scene is coming. If that is sensitive to you, then be aware of that. But don't let that turn you off. Like if you're hearing me say that, don't let that turn you off because as we've been discussing, this is quintessential 90s, but I think also ahead of its time with the production design, with the way it incorporates the music, the story that it's telling. So, yeah, I think it definitely lives up to its reputation. Real quick, ladies, I want to go back. Quick question. Do we think that Renton, does he relapse after he takes all that money?
I think he's got an addictive
Mm.
personality,
Okay.
and I don't believe that his escape is forever.
Yasmin?
I would actually agree with that.
Yeah.
I think he's in too deep. It's the most raw and real depiction of addiction. And I don't even think it's just about strength or willpower to give up. I think it's about resources. Renton pleading with his parents to want to go back to the clinics because, you know, he would have got morphine, you know, and they probably would have been a bit lenient and he would have found a way to escape. And his parents like, absolutely not. And I think if it took something like that to have that kind of support system, which away from his parents he clearly didn't have, I don't know how he would have survived with access to so much money and no support system. I think he absolutely would have relapsed.
I agree. Okay. Well, that's it for the show. Yasmin, thank you so much for joining us. This has been amazing. Is there anything you want to plug or tell people where we can find you?
So I am currently on social media. So you can find me at my first name dot surname, which is just Yasmin, Yasmin full stop Godo as a Godo. That's across Instagram. If you're gonna be that person and find me on LinkedIn, you will find me by the same name. And yeah, at the moment, finishing up my time on Rivals and really excited to work on my second short film. I think of taking in a lot of time and just allowing myself to really enjoy a film and actually remembering Trainspotting, something that I'm making that's quite quintessentially British in its own way, and is a Northern Soul film. I want to make a sci-fi Northern Soul film, slight
Ooh.
rom-com vibe, slight sci-fi vibe. So yeah, but it will feel very British, you know.
Yeah.
Northerners meet Londoners, so yeah, should be quite nice. And hoping to shoot in a Rivoli ballroom in Brockley, which is one of the last remaining London ballrooms, anyway, or one of the last remaining UK ballrooms with its original spring flooring since Second World War. Cool little
Wow.
fun fact.
That'd be amazing.
Can we find your first short film, or any of the other things you've
You
made?
can, you can. Great
Yeah.
question. So my first short film is a Channel 4 Random Acts short film. It's called Unfit to Work. So that's open bracket, UN, close bracket, FIT space 2 and then work. And then yeah, just type in Channel 4 Random Acts and that will come up. And that is on YouTube. I think it's recently been taken down due to some refurb stuff on 4 on demand, but it should be back up soon. So yeah, if you're one of the lucky ones, then you can see it. If you're in the UK, yeah.
Yeah. And we'll put links. We'll find some links and put them in the show notes. So.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Yasmin. This is us at Total 90s Recall. We're here every second and fourth Thursday of the month. You can find us on Instagram if you want more of us, because why not? At Total 90s Recall. That's Total 90S Recall. You can even email us. Let's chat. Let's chat about Trainspotting or whatever you want to chat about. Total90srecall@gmail.com if that's your thing. And if you are enjoying this, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening right now. And also give us a review. 5 stars really helps our discoverability, especially on Apple Podcasts. And if reviews aren't your thing, then tell somebody. The next time you're about to flee the country because you just stole thousands of pounds from your friends, tell the flight attendant or the person you're sitting next to on the plane on your way to the other country. We don't care. Tell them about Total 90s Recall. We appreciate it and we appreciate you. I'm Molly.
And I'm Chloe.
And we'll see you at the movies.